This is a production of Cornell University.
But we wanted to set, Barnaby and I wanted to set aside a certain 15, 20 minutes, it's already late, so we'll keep it short, to discuss what you thought of this workshop in the sense that is this a forum that you would like to continue on a more regular basis? Because it's very clear from the early discussion that the incentives structure in academic life today focuses on discussion within your discipline and work within your subfield. And the opportunity for this type of cross-disciplinary dialogue are infrequent. And this last time we had this was 2006. And the question we want to raise is it worthwhile to do this on a more regular basis with the aim of influencing the future of the social sciences through our dialogue and discussion and the sharing of work and ideas. So that, Barnaby, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I could say something about that as well. I mean, in the biological sciences and the physical sciences and others, there are very regular workshops that are hosted at places like Cold Spring Lab, actually all over. Santa Fe is another example where people get together from different areas to talk about things. In the social sciences, from what I gather, they're annual meetings, but they're people sort of separate by their subdisciplines. So if you go to the psychology meeting, it's all the little subdisciplines. If you go to the economics meeting, same thing. So one thing we're wondering is, especially from the point of view of a foundation that funds these sorts of things, whether the types of gatherings you see in some of the natural sciences would also be beneficial to have in the social sciences. Maybe the time's not right for that, I don't know, but it's at least worth thinking about. And maybe even in the context of what features of this type of meeting have been most valuable. And then also thoughts on periodicity. So right now it's like once every 6-7 years, something like that. So I think we've seen a lot. It's been enough time we can see changes in the fields, which is nice. But every 6 or 7 years, to some might seem like a long time. So we just want to welcome any thoughts, and I'm looking for things to fund, so this is something that fits into the zone for me. But I think other foundations are too. I talk to people who run other foundations and what their priorities are, and they're always looking for what's new. That's something that's always found.
I asked Barnaby, what's the endowment at the Templeton? And he said, about 10 billion. That's larger than ours at Cornell.
Well, it depends how you count and how you count it. But the focus is on what to do next always. And so there's always a lot of competition for that and ideas. Yeah, we want ideas. Yeah.
So,
Go ahead, Larry.
So I'm actually in a sort of a institutional role at the moment, where I'm tasked with trying to get people across different disciplines to talk with one another. So I guess my overall comment would be, I think we need to let 1,000 flowers bloom and have 999 of them wither, just to figure out what works in the social sciences. So trying all sorts of things probably makes a lot of sense.
Oh, good.
I think I'd be happy to talk about my experiences in trying to cross disciplinary boundaries, but that's an idiosyncratic set of stories.
There's always a question also of time. Is 1 day good, a week good? Centers for Behavioral Studies, like a semester, people take time off to work together in these sort of Marshall Sage Foundation or Center for Advanced Study in Behavioral Sciences, that's longer. There's all these different types of formats as well, but we're thinking mostly just short things right now, I think.
Yeah, I don't think you have to go outside social science. I mean, you keep invoking biology, and that's great. But I think demography and management, organizational behavior are positive examples within the social sciences where the interdisciplinary conversations are so old we think of these as disciplines, but for the most part they aren't actually institutionalized as departments or what have you within schools. but I think that they all emerged out of a focus on a specific set of things to be explained.
Right. Or problem,
where everybody recognized that it was a multi-causal world and we need to get inputs. And so I think that looking to their success is a way of fostering success in whatever enterprise we want to get into here. And I think that we got a lot more conversation and jazz out of the last two presentations because they were so concrete. We could understand what the dependent variable was than on some of the early morning stuff where it was rather vague, other than when you mentioned we mentioned problem of interdisciplinarity, and even though Duncan had declared Freakonomics to be contradicted by predictive irrational, we all immediately went to incentives as the way in which we were going to explain the problem of why we aren't more interdisciplinary.
Let me just throw one other thing in the mix here. And one of the things we're dealing with right now a lot, and when we look at different programs, is there's this whole tension between things that are more applied and problem focused, and how those can bring people from different disciplines together to solve those problems. And then another camp that says no, all this practical stuff's just not good for science. We need to have blue sky research where there isn't a structure, where people are free to explore and try different things, and that's how you get innovation. We try to actually balance that, have a little bit of both.
Yeah.
But we've found that typically those camps don't really mix too well. Some people like to have the narrow, clear path. Others somehow find that not as unencumbered as something that's more free. So, yeah.
So let me propose something concrete, but also preface by saying that it's striking that we sit here at this table and talk so much about culture, institutions, and so forth. And in fact, what we need to do is think about those ideas in the setting where interdisciplinarity in the social sciences needs to be fostered. That will be fostered by an appropriate design of institutions. And that will happen, it has happened at certain places. Actually, many people at this table are graduates or semi-graduates of those places. Michigan, Santa Fe Institute, I think Oxford in many ways is an example. There are places where, for one reason or another, historically, and Cornell, I think.
Thank you.
Took
you long enough.
Why, how does that work? Why are those institutions somewhat different in the way they're set up? Can we identify that? That's worth thinking about. Because I think that is the key to making this happen in more places. But the specific proposal I have is, I think maybe you could imagine some works, not poverty, not solving the poverty problem, but rather workshops which engage faculty with students and postdocs. So I think one of the ways that you make all of this happen is you need to somehow create a venue where the next generation can be trained to think in these ways. At the end of the day, you produce people who are interdisciplinary in their thinking. Mm-hmm. You don't create teams of people who are disciplinary, economists, lawyers, what have you, because basically those people don't really work very well together. So I think one needs to create an environment and possibly a series of workshops funded by you-know-who would be one way to go.
I thought this was tremendously stimulating. I had all kinds of ideas just listening to the other papers. I agree that it's too rare that you get to sit down with people from different disciplines to talk about not just new research, but the structures and the constraints and why it is that it can be hard to work across disciplines, and what can be done about that. So, I mean, I, for one anyway, and I think there are others too, would say absolutely there should be more of these, and it shouldn't be every 8 years. I think one of the real problems, as we've discussed, is the fact that if you do have some really exciting new research and it takes 2 or 3 years for anybody to hear about it, that's too long. And so it would be good, if there were forums like this to present work in progress. And also I, for one, think that you could do both. You could have kind of the big picture, what would it take, to create a social super collider? If the interdisciplinary teams that have been put together don't work very well, is there some way they might work better? But also to talk about the specific products that come out of the experimental work that have tried these kinds of approaches. So I think that that there would be a lot of value in that. One thing about bringing students into it, I ran this summer program over 4 years that was meant to take on problems that were global in scope and transnational in nature and get students and experts working collaboratively. And the hardest thing was to get the PhD students to think outside their discipline. By their third year, they're extremely resistant, to getting outside their own disciplinary training. And so, curiously, it's
have a shot at jobs if they don't.
Yeah.
The
So-
jobs are defined that narrow way.
Right. I mean, if their professors bring them along, it's possible. But I found that actually quite frustrating. The undergraduates are very happy and excited about working collaboratively and working across disciplines.
Again, to go back to the demography and population science example, NIH funded population centers that included training grants, and I think that the places mentioned, plus Princeton and Berkeley, managed to beat the job market because their students were, despite their interdisciplinary training, were better at their home disciplines, in whether that was population health or social demography than the competition. And so the students actually profited from their affiliation with pop centers, just as the faculty mentors did.
So part of the tension here is to be good in your field, you have to be cutting edge at some level. And then to be good in interdisciplinary work, you need to understand cutting edge work in more than one field. And that requires real investment in order to talk intelligently with my labor economist friends, or to talk intelligently. And that's just simply hard. And so the tension is between bringing people together on a occasional basis versus long exposure to different ideas, and there are just simply tensions there. The Wisconsin model that John had mentioned at IRP was one such occasion which I benefited from, which allowed me to talk with my labor economist friends at great length over a period of many years, letting me understand their conventional view of the world, which John doesn't like. I understand that, but to argue with them, you really need to know their models, or else they'll just won't talk to you.
Steve and Duncan.
So one mechanism that I found very helpful, it's all about mechanisms today, isn't it? For helping foster interdisciplinarity in my own upbringing as a mathematical biologist was Gordon conferences.
Right.
Now, I don't know, do we have Gordon conferences in social science? I wouldn't think so. So a Gordon conference, which I think maybe grew out of chemistry and then later into biology, was a 1 week conference. They still exist.
There's like 600 of them a year.
Yeah. So, but it's the organizational setup of it that I think really worked. So I used to go as a graduate student, and at one point was an organizer of one as a professor. But they're a week long. They take place at usually a remote prep school, like say in New Hampshire or something. There's nothing to do except hang out with the other people. About 100 people are invited. And you have 2 talks in the morning and 2 at night, and the afternoons are free. And since there's nothing to do, the idea is that you're going to go swimming together or canoeing or play volleyball, and you see each other in shorts, and it's so informal that people become friendly and sit around on the grass and talk about stuff and admit how little they know, which is a key thing to interdisciplinary work. You have to become friendly. I mean, I think actually this is part of why Ann Arbor and Ithaca have an advantage, because we're seeing each other at the farmer's market and at daycare and walking our dog, and you become friends, and then you can become interdisciplinary collaborators, because you have to be vulnerable to open up, you know, how naive you are about something, to start learning these languages, because as you say, you have to be a pro in your thing, and then you have to be willing to understand and appreciate the language from a pro in something else. Or maybe it was your point, Peyton, about that, or someone said that you have to be interdisciplinary in your own mind. Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that it is hard, but these Gordon conferences were a very good method. So I think if you were going to fund something, and there were a lot of young people. I mean, you had a lot of grad students at those. So it sounds like you know about them because
that's why I was thinking of these types of models, because you see them in certain sciences, and then other sciences you don't seem to see them at all. And it's strange to see, well, why is that? You know, why don't you have, that I know of, for instance, political scientists getting together, you know, going canoeing, you know, at 100, 600 times a year across these different sciences, and I don't know the answer to that.
I actually think that format, you know, with all due respect, as opposed to this format, is a much better way to learn and get to the big questions and make progress. To me, this felt, you know, much as it was stimulating and fun, it was hard for me to learn a lot in this setting. In fact, it was the conversations after the talks that were usually the most informative.
Yeah.
So I think you maximize that when you have fewer talks and a lot of time to sit around on the grass or to walk or to take a hike.
You know, this model is like, even in computer science, I think like this thing called the Foo Camp, and I've been just come down to one of these, but sort of unstructured. It's an unconference, but you bring together people who are highly creative. Duncan, you had a comment?
So I had a very similar point to Steve, and I was going to observe that Peyton's examples were all of college towns.
Yeah.
And I think
There's something
that you know, like you're here because you run into Victor while you're walking your dog. You know, I mean, this is really, I mean, because this is why Cornell is the way it is, right? It's because like everyone sort of lives in each other's pockets. You all live in Cayuga Heights. You all play tennis together. You all, like, your kids go to the same schools. There's nothing else to do.
It's helpful.
Right? And so you just think about stuff all the time. And in New York, it's not like that. People, you know, Columbia is terrible. Like NYU is terrible. I mean, they're great universities, but you go there and you do your thing and then you leave.
So NYU actually has more interdisciplinary stuff than you would imagine. But part of that is faculty counseling.
Is faculty what?
Housing.
Housing, yes.
We have that
It's the
also.
same mechanism. You're a small
in
town.
Chicago, right? We have basically.
But I would say there's another
Chicago.
approach to trying to solve this problem is that which I have some experience with now, is the research lab, right? That, you know, there's something, and so we're in an environment that most university faculty would think is intolerable, which is cubicles, right? And the interesting thing is that when we moved from Yahoo to Microsoft Research, you know, Microsoft Research is organized around offices. Everyone has offices, and we actually insisted on being in cubicles because, from experience, we had realized that the minute you put a wall there, you dramatically curtail the flow of information from one person to another. And having bounced around a few offices in the last 2 or 3 years, like I can attest that everything you change, the height of the cubicle wall, the size of the cubicle, a door, everything has a really, really noticeable impact on who you talk to and how frequently you talk to them. And so it's a different way of getting at this same thing, that you need like prolonged contact between people in order for them to sort of start to see things the way that they see them, and to have these sort of collaborative multi-person teams working on problems. And so it's sort of setting up just even physical circumstances that promote this kind of activity. And I think, things like Gordon conferences work, serve a sort of complementary purpose, but there's also this, like, you've got to be there for, years together to do some of this stuff.
Okay, this is a good point to end this workshop. And first of all, I want to thank Todd Bridges, who's the NSF postdoc at the Center for the Study of Economy Society, for doing such a good job on the nuts and bolts of this workshop. And I want to thank all of you for coming and participating in this day's event. It was a great discussion.
This has been a production of Cornell University, on the web at cornell.edu.